Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to The Friendly Outsider. I'm Jay, I'm The Friendly Outsider, and it's been a while since I did a podcast, but I figured it's about time. So here I am. You can see I got a hell of a backdrop behind me. Fortunately, when all this COVID thing landed, I happened to be in one of the more beautiful places in the world. I'm in Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada. My hometown, the place where I grew up. And when I grew up here, I realized it was a pretty place, and as I got older, I was like, oh, this is really nice, but it's only after getting out in the world and then coming back that I realized, damn, this place is crazy. I'll just stand up. Sorry for you audio listeners, you can't see, but for any of our video listeners, you can see I've got quite the backdrop behind me, just of mountains and nature and sky. It's pretty crazy. Just walked up here from my parents' house where I've been spending my COVID time. And a little bit more. So I've been avoiding doing a podcast. Well, not avoiding. I don't want to capitalize on the pain and stress of the time that people are going through. So I haven't wanted to do a podcast until I had something I thought was relevant to say that I feel is, not necessarily, it could be said another time rather than this one, because it's the whole COVID thing that has put me on to this. But I don't feel I'm capitalizing on that, even though what I'm about to talk about is very COVID related. And anytime I talk about something, I generally use my own experiences as an anecdote to relate to that. And I thought I'd just talk about some of my thoughts on how things are going and where we're at right now. So I'll start with a bit of a catch up on my life. Now, it's weird because I just literally 2 seconds ago said I'll talk about some of my own experiences. And I'm going to follow that up with a comment that I don't really like to talk about myself that much. At least I don't intend to on this podcast. And that's totally false. But I guess I have certain things I do want to talk about, certain things I don't, and one of the things just generally in life I'm not all that comfortable talking about, that I don't really intend to talk about a whole lot, even in this podcast overall, but is something that's pretty relevant to this specific episode, is personal health issues. I'm a person who believes in good health. I exercise and I eat healthy, and I've been doing that for a few years. I've been exercising for about 13 years consistently. Before that, I always mountain biked everywhere, but I actually got onto a decent exercise regimen starting about 13 years ago, although, it was on, off. And then the last couple of years, I got really into yoga, which was on, essentially. I didn't turn that off. Just loved it. And when I moved from Japan to Australia, I really focused. I wanted to learn to cook because it was hard for me to cook in Japan. I didn't have a lot of access to affordable Western ingredients, I guess is probably the thing I'd say. And also I just didn't really know how to cook. And so I took that kind of as a new challenge when I moved to Australia. I wanted to focus on learning to cook delicious foods. And that's what I did. And I spent the few years there. I learned to cook a lot of soups, and I was eating eggs and oatmeal and yogurt and fruits for breakfast, and just trying to maintain a fairly healthy, lifestyle overall, because I was overweight at an earlier time in my life by a good bit. That's what originally got me started exercising 13 years ago. And when I had a son in particular, I didn't want to die while he's still young. I had a boss who died when I was in Japan, who was young. He was, I think 47 or something like that, with a 15-year-old son. And it was a sad time. I remember thinking, wow, his son's still in junior high school. And I didn't want that to happen to my son. Now, my old boss who died, it wasn't from eating. I mean, he unfortunately got cancer, and that's just the way it went. But I want to, try and up my odds. And so I ate healthy. So, I came to Canada, and, I was here for a couple of months, and I started feeling unwell. I'm not really going to go into a lot of the details, because as I said, it's not necessarily something I do feel all that comfortable talking about. But I had a health issue. I had to check into the hospital, and spent 5 or 6 nights in the hospital in Vancouver. And fortunately, I'm in my homeland with my loving parents who came up from my hometown, Kamloops, which again, for those video watchers can see behind me. And I came back and stayed with my parents. So this was at the very start of March. So it was before everyone was quarantining. But we were just starting to know about COVID. I have friends and family in Japan, so I was concerned about what was going on there. So I was kind of on top of COVID a little before everyone else, since it sort of hit there with the cruise ship before everywhere else. So I started quarantining early because after surgery you're a little immune compromised, and I was healing, and so I got onto quarantine, and then COVID kind of kicked in. And then all of a sudden, everyone was isolating around the whole world, really. And wow, what a year it's been. It's crazy. So one of the reasons I didn't want to talk about or do a podcast is because, I've had this medical issue that I've had to deal with, and it sucks. But who am I to complain? I mean, everyone's going through something right now. Pretty much. Everyone is going through something right now, because even if you're the most prosperous person ever and in a safe place or whatever, it's still not the same world it's been. So no matter who you are, what your socioeconomic status is, what your location is, pretty much everyone in the world, except for really, really isolated tribes, are going through something right now. So, I've had these issues, and they're my issues, and I've talked about them with people around me, of course, but I haven't wanted to do a podcast on that because everyone's got their own stuff going on. And especially right now, it's sometime in the future, if people are watching this when I'm watching it right now, America is essentially burning down. There's riots going on, people protesting the murder of Floyd George by a police officer there. And yeah, that's a rough situation. And, there's people out there fighting injustices in a time when we're being told we're supposed to stay inside. And that's a hard thing to resolve, I think, probably for a lot of people. Like, do I go out and do what I really believe is the right thing to do that any other time in the past 100 years, essentially? I mean, not exactly, but any other time for quite a while, it would have been safe to go outside and do this, and therefore very important to do it. All of a sudden, we have a health issue where I want to go out and do something. Like, for example, let's say you're a young black male. You want to go out and protest the murder of unarmed young black males, except that maybe you're going to get COVID and die. So it makes for a really difficult decision. And that kind of brings me on to what this episode is about uncertainty and where to go forward. And so coming back to my own situation, actually, before I come back to my own situation, I just want to acknowledge all the pain, all the stress, all the difficulties everyone's going through. And what can I say that someone else hasn't already said? So I'm not going to say a lot other than, if you need help, please try and find it. Because people do need help at this time, not, sometimes financial, sometimes emotional or whatever. I can't imagine being a person alone in an apartment in a shoebox in New York right now, where you can't go outside barely, So if you need help, please try to find it. And it's sometimes that can be really hard, but people seem to also be pretty open to listening and doing what they can to help right now. So anyways, I'm sure someone else has already said that, so I just don't want to keep rambling off with a bunch of cliches here. So I'm going to move forward. So I had this health issue, and then I healed because I'm healthy. I was pretty healthy going into all this, and I've been staying with my parents, and fortunately, we're in a location where we have access to a lot of very good quality food. So I've been eating, and my parents like to eat quite healthy, a lot of garden grown food. So I've been eating quite organic and a lot of, good, healthy, like ethically grown chickens and stuff like that. And my parents don't eat red meat, so I adapt to the eating patterns of those with whom I'm accommodating at a given time. And in this case, it's a non-red meat eater, so I haven't eaten a lot of red meat other than the occasional Wendy's burger. And they are not a sponsor of this podcast, but damn, are Wendy's burgers good, I gotta say. Coming back to Canada, that has been my guilty pleasure. Dave Single, bueno. Anyways, so I'm not looking for sponsorship from Dave's either, by the way, or from Wendy's either, by the way. But if you want to slide me a couple free burgers, I definitely won't say no. Anyways, I haven't been eating a lot of red meat, but I've been eating quite healthy, and that has helped me get better, and it's been good. So I am healthy, and, because I went into this healthy, it's been easy for me to recover. Not easy, but it's been a fairly smooth road to recovery. And so now I've caught up to the rest of the world. That unfortunately for the rest of the world, got slowed down to my pace while I was recovering from surgery. But actually, the world is still slowed down. It's just starting to open up. So here where I am in British Columbia, Canada, we were on not a lockdown. We weren't legally required to be at home. We were requested, stay-at-home request. I don't actually understand a lot of the details because I was staying in before everyone else started staying in, and I'm still in when everyone else has sort of started going out. So I'm not exactly clear on what the world out there is like, to be honest. I haven't been out much in the past few months other than a few doctor's appointments and a few times shopping with my parents to the grocery store, but very, very little. I'm getting eaten literally alive right this second by these mosquitoes. Get off me, little guys. So I'm healed. I'm ready to get out in the world. The world's not entirely ready to be gotten out into, but it is getting there. And I had an opportunity to go live in a neighboring city named Kelowna, which is a very beautiful location on this planet. I have never really been there much, though, even though and also because it's a nearby city that's of a roughly similar size. I never went there because I think I always just thought there wasn't that much difference from there than here. The climate's somewhat the same. They're on a lake, we're on a river. I didn't realize it's actually quite a different socioeconomic climate there. It's actually quite a bit. They've got a good bit more money there, I believe, and there's a lot of millionaires there. And I know Arnold Schwarzenegger has a home there, and other people, some of the maybe Charlie Sheen, can't remember, but it's known. A lot of celebrities own places there because it's beautiful. It's wine country. There's a lot of wine there. And so I got an offer to go live there and stay there. And that interested me and also created a bit of a ponderance. What do I do? So that kind of brings me to what this podcast is about, this episode. And it's making decisions in a time of uncertainty. And, pardon my language, but goddamn, if there was ever a time of uncertainty, it's right now. Now, I say that and still mean it, even though I'm going to kind of add a bit of an addendum to that. It is right now because the whole world is feeling this right now. We're in a lot of uncertainty. But this actually isn't my first brush with uncertainty, and many people deal with uncertainty in their lives, and stability is actually a pleasure of the more economically fortunate. There's unfortunately a lot of the people in this world who don't have as much money often don't get the pleasure of stability and certainty. Certainty to some degree is a first world, what's that word they keep using? Privilege. That's the word I'm looking for, privilege. And I literally mean that as a privilege. Something we get in the first world because we have jobs and economies and governments to keep everything stable, which allow us to feel sure of the lifestyle in which we live and the homes in which we buy, and enable us to be willing to do things like take out 30-year loans or whatever on a home because we feel we'll be able to navigate our way through the economic climate to be able to pay that rent. Whereas if you're in a poor nation where you're struggling for food every day and maybe even in shelter, but it's high. Who's going to make a 30-year commitment, right? It's more, I think that's a generational commitment. So certainty is something we have a privilege of, and I don't like to use that word because it's sort of loaded these days, but it is the appropriate word in this case because it's something that is not something afforded to those often in less certain times. So getting back to my own circumstance, 2011, March 3rd. No. March is the third month. March 11th, 2011. 311, we hear about 9/11 a lot. Well, if you're someone from Japan, particularly a foreigner who's living in the English bubble in Japan, and the English lifestyle, 311 is a term that comes up a lot. And that was the great Tohoku earthquake, and I know I'm getting it the wrong name here, but essentially that was the big earthquake and tsunami and then nuclear meltdown of Fukushima that we had in 2011. I was in Yokohama at that time, which was not so close to the epicenter, fortunately not in the path of the tsunami, but close enough that it was a shaker. We felt it big in Yokohama. There were a few buildings that were never to be used again. They had to be taken down, though not many, because if there's one thing I learned from that earthquake, the Japanese sure know how to build buildings to survive earthquakes. It wasn't the earthquake that caused problems in Japan. It was the tsunami and then Fukushima. But this whole story could be its own podcast at some point. So I'm going to delve into it enough to have some detail on it, but not enough that I remove the entire ability to just have a storytelling episode someday about that event. But when that happened, I was in my office and the big one happened. And in 17 years in Japan, I went through a lot of earthquakes of varying sizes. That was the only one I ever ran outside for. And I ran down the stairs and I stood out in the street, and it swayed for 5 or 6 minutes, which in earthquake times is ridiculous. Usually an earthquake is 30 seconds is a long one. 10 seconds is a standard small one that you feel and you're like, oh, what's that? Okay, I'll go back to work, kind of thing. So 5-6 minutes is a long time. I met the girl in the office next to me for the first time during the earthquake. Had enough time to shake, introduce ourselves, talk about it, but we're kind of surfing, we're sort of squatted low in the middle of the street, parking lot, because we'd run outside to the parking lot across from our building, and the whole world is shaking. Anyways, let's see. The next morning I got a call. I'm not going to go through the full details, but the next morning I get a call from a guy I was working with, and he told me Fukushima was melting down. Now, Fukushima was a few hundred kilometers from Yokohama. Now, the thing about radiation is once you get it, you got it. It's there for the rest of your life. Now, I didn't know that much about radiation at the time, but I did know it was bad. When I was young, I grew up when Chernobyl happened. What was that, around 86? So I think I was 10. So it was kind of a boogeyman in my head. I knew it was really bad. It was something you didn't want to deal with. So I got a call. I got woken up at 11 a.m. on March 12th, 2011, the day after Fukushima. And it was the day after the earthquake and tsunami. It's Fukushima's melting down. I'm like, where's Fukushima? Northeast of Tokyo. How far? A couple hundred kilometers. I woke up and I said to my wife, I said, pack the stuff, we're going. She said, where are we going? I was like, west, away. Didn't know where we were going. Didn't know what was going to happen, but I just wanted to get as far away as I could because we'll figure that out. I'd only just started a business. Unfortunately, I had saved up some money to start that business. So I had a bunch of cash in a bank account, not a whack, and it was supposed to be to start my business, but in times like that, I shouldn't say you. In times like that, people make decisions based on the best thing they can do, and I'm going to get to that point later. But I did what I thought was right, and we just packed up and we started driving west, and it was crazy. It was hard to get gas because there was long lineups, blocks long, for the gas station. And we went to a grocery store, and it was being pillaged, and I don't mean looted like riot style in America these days, sorry for all the people, but I just mean there was so many people buying everything, and it was panic buying. And the thing about panic buying is it's not I need to buy. It's not people literally freaking out. It's when it's groupthink panic. So it's when the group is panicking. On an individual level, it's actually quite coherent and rational at the time. You're aware of what's going on, but you're in the grocery store and people are buying a bunch of stuff, and it's I don't know what's going to be here tomorrow or the next day. It's uncertainty. So you buy some stuff. So I bought a loaf of bread, which I didn't even barely eat bread at the time. And I can't remember a few things. The loaf of bread stands out though, because I literally wasn't a bread eater, but I just wanted to make sure we had some sort of sustenance, something to give energy if we needed it. And, we ate that over the couple of days moving forward. And then we got in the car and we drove to a city called Nagoya, which was about a 6-hour drive, I think about 400 kilometers further west. And, so at this point, I'm 600 or 700 kilometers as the crow flies from Fukushima. And I decided, okay, I guess this is where we can kind of stop and see what's going on. So we got a hotel, and my friend Hank was there with his partner at the time. And we we met up with them, my wife and son and I, and he was, not even 3 years old. And it's like, okay, what do we do? And so we camped out there. And we spent the next 3 nights in a hotel there, and I spent 3 days trying to figure out what to do next because uncertainty. So at that point, it was quite similar to a lot of the kind of things we see today on a global scale. If you're spending any time on the internet, which those of you who aren't are probably a little more sane than those who are, to be honest. There's a lot of stuff out there that can cause a lot of stress. And so what I mean by this is at that time, the early days after Fukushima, and even still now to some degree, you could go on the internet and you could find a website claiming that there was nothing to worry about. There was no nuclear radiation coming out. 99.9999% of the radiation that had escaped within the first, few minutes or few hours or whatever. And it all gone east out into the ocean, wasn't coming towards people, and there's nothing to worry about. And there was just a tiny trickle coming along that they were trying to deal with. Or, you could find another website and not even have to dig any deeper that says Fukushima is dumping radiation at unrecorded amounts in human history, and it's going to cause unprecedented levels of cancer, and we're all going to die, just the worst catastrophic projections that you could ever imagine, and everything in between. So how do you make a decision with that? You're navigating through literally entirely completely diametric opinions that are both backed up by links, scientists, doctors, and people who are claiming with the full veracity of their entire belief as a human being that what they're saying is correct and anyone else saying anything else is wrong. You find both sides of that. And if you only look for one side, well, you kind of feel a little better because everyone you're reading about is saying the same thing. And you kind of feel like, okay, well, what I'm saying is justified. But if you're the kind of person like me who's a little objective, you're reading both sides, you're like, And then you also have, because people have these opinions backed by, belief, but also desperation of hope, they cling to these opinions and attach their almost their worth to it, their self-worth, like that they're arguing. And so at the time, there's a word for foreigner in Japanese. I believe I've addressed it on this podcast before, but I'll say it again. It's called gaijin. It's a little coarse. I don't like to use it in public all that often, public company. It's one I'll throw around with friends and, in the right circumstances, because there's a time and place for everything. I don't even like how I said that in a bad way, because it's even got its use in a time and a place. But anyways, gaijin means outside person. They came up with a moniker in the English community in Japan at the time called a flyjin, fly away. And so it was a pejorative meaning to flee. So it was those who escaped to Japan and didn't stick around to show solidarity with the Japanese people. And so now you have people who are saying, you stand around, show solidarity. We have an economy to support once this all comes back, and people are homeless, and the tsunami to recover from. That that's very fair. But you also have some people who feel like there are outsiders in a community that doesn't accept them, and there's radiation, and who what is the how do you be brave to radiation? Radiation doesn't care how brave you are. So we're dealing not just with facts. Well, facts. I say facts because what were the facts? But just a crazy amount of internet that makes it so hard to understand what to do with people who are telling you you're wrong, whatever you choose to do. Talk about uncertainty. How do you decide what to do? And so you add that. I'm how old was I? Early 30s man with a young family and a young child. That I don't want to get cancer, but a new business that I'm just trying to start. What do you do? And I stayed in Nagoya for 3 nights. Well, I got some offers to come and stay with people in Canada and various places around the world. I count myself very fortunate that I have, family and friends that loved me enough to be willing to open their homes to me and my wife, who they hadn't met, and a young child, which is not an easy thing, especially if you don't know that young child very well. Like, I'm talking people that I knew around the world that hadn't met my kid yet. And I got offers of money, like straight up money. I had a couple friends. I want to give a shout out. I'll give a shout out in spirit to them. I'm thinking of you, and you know who you are. I'm not going to say it publicly because I don't like to get acknowledged for that kind of thing myself. But, you know, a couple of you offered to just give me straight up money, cash, to deal with that. And I wanted to take it. It's hard to say no when that's happening. I had just enough. And honestly, I was in a fairly financially precarious position for a couple of years after that. Because of that. But, you know, humans are awesome in times of trouble. And, you know, the world stepped up at that point and really, like, put together, you know, charity drives and everything. My stepdad, like, he owned a screen printing shop at the time to do shirts, and he was screen printing shirts for the Tsunami Relief Fund and donated the profits, or maybe even the revenue, I don't remember, to the Tsunami Relief Fund or whatever. So it was just an amazing time. And so people personally opened up to me. And in the end, because I'm just a fortunate person in life, I have been lucky enough to have been born into a fairly decent, you know, not the most decent of means, because we weren't well when I was young. We weren't prosperous. My mom worked hard and struggled, and she was a single mother, but a country of opportunity. I was born into you know, plenty of opportunity and support, so, and also emotional support from my family. So because I had that, and I have been able to get out in the world and meet people, my family has also been able to get out. So my brother, who was living in Spain, well, still does, with his wife and his family, and their parents owned a place next door that they didn't live in full time. It was their summer place kind of thing that was open, and they opened up their home to us. So we actually got to go stay in Spain for a month and evacuate. So now we're in Spain. We're the fly-jin, or I'm the fly-jin. My wife and kid, of course, were Japanese, so they're not gaijin to be able to be fly-jin, but I'm a fly-jin. But I did what I thought was right. And we caught and looked from afar for a month. But, you know, it was kind of nice because we were sitting on the Mediterranean Sea. I'm drinking delicious coffee, spending time with family. I got to know my brother better than I'd ever known him in my life. You know, I got to know him as mutual adults, and it was so awesome. But on the other side of that, the country, my home that I've been in for the past 11 years, you know, my wife's family, who's now my family, is there, and the country's like irradiated potentially. My friends are there. No one knows what's happening. I've got a business kind of that I'm fortunately able to sort of do remotely. And, you know, coming up on a month, because I think we bought a month ticket. It's like, okay, well, our ticket is back to Japan. Do we go back or not? And I had to make that decision in that uncertainty of just not knowing. You just can't know. You can read stuff. You can start to figure out, I think this, I think that, I think probably this, but you just can't know. And that not knowing, that uncertainty can be crippling, because we live in this age of certainty with the internet to some degree. Like remember, well, for those of us who are Gen X or boomers, will remember, I don't know if I have any boomers listening to this podcast. I hope I do, or I hope someday a boomer listens to this. I love you guys. You're my parents. But you know, for those of us who were around before, I can remember having arguments with friends as kids, because you'd be like, this is something, and they'd be like, no, that's something, and you'd argue a fact, and it would be like, you'd end up, sometimes they'd break a relationship, or sometimes it'd take you like, you know, days or weeks to recover from it. Whereas now, you know, I've joked around with my friend, shout out Devron in Yokohama. You know, we've joked around so many times that, you know, as we started to almost get into something like that, like, what the hell are we doing? We got the internet, you know, Siri will tell you in 2 seconds. I gotta be careful not to say that too loud, or my phone's gonna cut off this video and it's gonna kick in. But yeah, you could find out the answer to whatever in seconds, and then you don't need to have these relationship destroying arguments over something stupid like say a rule in a card game or something like that, right? So that's taken away a lot of uncertainty, which has led to things like arguments and anger on the internet, and we've lost that ability to be uncertain about things, because you can find out, is the shop open before you get there? Are my friends going to be there? Like, I remember being another anecdote from being a child. So Kamloops, again, behind me for all you viewers versus the listeners. Kamloops is about 3.5 hour drive. Well, when I was a young kid, it was like a 5.5 or 6 hour drive from Vancouver. and before Expo 86, before they opened the faster highway. And so we'd be going to meet someone in Vancouver. I remember my mom would phone in the morning, 10 a.m. Yeah, we'll be at this McDonald's at this intersection between like 3:30 or 4. Meet us there around then, 3:30, 4. And sometimes we wouldn't get there until 5 if traffic was really bad. And it would just be like, you just go, and they sometimes would have been there for half an hour before us, or we'd wait half an hour for them, It wasn't certain. We didn't have, and you couldn't just text someone as you're 15 minutes away and they'd show up, It was just a different world. Now we have so much certainty. You can find out what's being sold, exactly how much it costs. You could get it cheaper somewhere else you couldn't. And, but that also creates uncertainty. It creates that, what do they call that? The fear of missing out, FOMA? I don't know if it's the same thing, but it's like, yeah, I guess it probably kind of is when you buy something and then you wonder, was it the cheapest? And so they try and allay those fears with those kind of things. If you find a cheaper price within a month, we'll match it. Everyone's trying to do everything. And we get so much certainty. So in times like this, now I'm going to bring it back to where we are. Times like this, with COVID, with uncertainty, where the world has definitely changed. This is like a 9/11 style event where it will, we don't know what it's going to be like after this. The world is going to be a different thing, though. We're going to be able to mark this as a before and after style event for the entire planet. We don't know where it's going to go, and we don't know what we got to do. And we're all making decisions, all of us. Everyone's got to make decisions. Some people's decision is, do I leave the house? Do I meet with my children and my grandchildren? Some people's decision is, do I wear a mask at work? Some people's decision is, do I argue with this asshole I don't agree with because he says you need a mask and I don't believe it? Fair enough. Well, it's not fair. I like to be a tolerant person, so I say fair enough. I like to look for the middle. I don't necessarily agree with that viewpoint, but there are other viewpoints in the world. The point is we're all trying to make decisions without any certainty. And one thing I do know is that there are a lot of people who are certain, and there are other people who are also certain, and they both believe that the other person who's equally as certain as they are is wrong, is certainly wrong. So my decision doesn't really matter. I'm going to talk about it insofar as, because I'm going to, again, use my own experiences to talk about people as general. But I mean, my own personal decision is quite irrelevant as to what everyone else is facing in the world. But I have to go out because I did just have a health issue in the last couple months, which probably makes me at higher risk. Then I balance it. The other side of it is I'm very healthy and active. I have been. I've been eating healthy food for months now, taking vitamin C, vitamin D, on a mostly vegetable-based diet. So on that regards, I'm probably a little less, at risk than other people, that haven't been as fortunate as I am to be able to eat as healthy as I have been able to. But I'm living with my parents right now, who are also very healthy. I mean, for their age, they're definitely, still, very young and healthy. I mean, they're both very active. They golf, they cycle, my father works, and they eat healthy and they do stuff, and they're very cognitively aware. So, but they're elderly. In particular, my stepfather, he's an elderly male, and that's an at-risk group. So my first decision, do I stay home? Do I leave the home? Well, I got this offer in Kelowna, so I have a place where I can go. And it's a place I would like to go because it's beautiful in the summer. But I'm not necessarily at the point in life where I'd like to is a huge consideration on how things go. The other thing I got to look at is where I need to go. And, I've got to make money. Just like a lot of people in the world. And unfortunately, I do have a profession where I can work from home. So I don't have to leave the home. And I can make enough money to live if I go out there and work. But where I'm at personally in life is that I've just spent the last 3 years. I can't remember how much I talked about this on the podcast. I know I said a goal. and I talked about my goals. So I'll talk about it a bit. I've been spending the last 3 years working on a podcast platform. And actually, this podcast you're either listening or watching is hosted on my podcast platform. If you go to friendly-outsider.com, which is the URL for this podcast, it's you see the friendlyoutsider.com website, but that is actually just an account on my podcast platform, which will be called Podcast Ease, or at least that's a tentative working title that I might bleep out, actually. Might have to bleep that one out. But anyways, I have a platform, and so I'm about to bring beta testers on, and what happens, people will create an account on my platform, and then they're able to host a podcast and do everything, like do all the social media marketing. They can have a standalone website the same as mine without having to know how to build a website. They don't have to know how to build the RSS feed that feeds out the podcast to people. They don't need to know how to do anything. My system does it all for them. It's just a matter of logging in, editing, filling in the values, going and creating accounts on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and etc. etc. So my next step is to write a business plan and to find investors. And the thing about finding investment is part of my marketing plan all along has been to go off both to use this podcast to promote the fact that my platform can host a podcast and to show a very clear working example of it, which I'm doing right now, but also to sell my platform based somewhat on my personality, my ability to network and bring people in, and to sell the idea of how podcasting is awesome, especially at this time of COVID, where a lot of people are going to be socially distancing for a few years to come. Some people forever. I think some people may not ever stop. I think podcasting is a way to bring us all together in a way that even if we're not physically together, we can be emotionally together. And podcasts, I've listened to a whack of podcasts in the past few months. Whoo-wee. And there's been a lot more podcasts started in the past few months that didn't exist. So I think podcasts are a great thing. So part of it, of my business plan has been to get out there and network in person. Well, doesn't necessarily have to be in person, but my personality is a lot of my business strategy. I mean, I'm letting you guys in on, it wasn't necessarily something I was going to get out there and sell as a thing, but it's been my plan all along. And now there's COVID season. So I've got this decision, like, do I get a job? It's the safe thing to do. It's the stable thing to do, but it does not move me forward from my family or my long-term goals at all. But it puts me to risk. Do I go out? Do I go to Kelowna where there's a lot more money and I can potentially work with my personality to find people who can share my dream with me and hopefully invest, and we can make money and a future together off my platform? Do I go out and do that, or do I, there are ways to do it online, which I will also be, working on. But how do you decide? And the simple answer is, there isn't one. There is no simple answer. There's no simple answer for anyone right now. No one. Now, I've made a decision as to what I'm going to do, and I'll get to that in a second, but that's kind of what I'm going to do is sort of the epilogue. As I said, my own personal situation is kind of irrelevant. It's just, it's more of a framework on which to talk about the ideas I'm talking about in this episode of the podcast. But I just wanted to talk about that idea of uncertainty. And, one thing I really, really learned from the whole earthquake thing and the tsunami thing and having to make a decision in that time of uncertainty is I do not criticize other people's decisions that they made in that time. And I do not criticize the decisions people are making now. We just don't know. And now I can criticize the actions of some people right now, and I do, but I also try to temper that with understanding as to why they're acting in the way they are. And some people are assholes. There's no doubt about that. And some people, that's been enhanced by let's be straight up, the panic of this all. And even if you're thinking coherently, like living in an environment of group panic, which we all are, so I don't want to criticize how anyone is or what anyone's doing, and I try to temper my criticism with understanding, because right now, this is a time which I think compassion serves us as a race better than anger. It really does. I mean, look at what's happening in America right now. It makes my heart bleed. Like, I'm on a Canadian Pride tour right now. I love this country. Look at this behind me. Like, my neighbors are burning down in anger and hatred. I hate that. It's not where I wanted this podcast to go. But, it's because people are scared and they're uncertain. I mean, how hard of a decision is that to make, to go to protest your right to live while you walk on the streets in a time where walking on the streets can kill you? Kind of want to edit this. Okay, I'm just going to take a moment to recover. I'll get back in. Okay, I'm going to try that again. So how hard is that to make a decision to go out and walk on the streets, to protest for the right to be able to just walk along the street and stay alive when that action of protest can kill you? They have to be certain that protesting is what they want to do. That's a dedication. And it's unfortunate that it's taken anger to breed that. So let's have compassion for those who are doing that. And even for those who, feel that that's the wrong thing to do. Or those that can't do that or whatever. Let's just have some compassion for each other. So getting back to, dealing with uncertainty and making decisions, I guess maybe the conclusion I can come to is sort of like, when I made that decision, so in the end, let's go back to the conclusion of what I decided with the Japan thing. I mean, I stayed there for 17 years, so I guess it's probably fairly clear I went back at some point. But I decided to go back at the end of that month with my wife and my child to my country that was under rolling blackouts of electricity because they'd shut down all the nuclear power plants and potential radiation. And still, it was only a month in, we were still rebuilding, totally. They're still rebuilding, but I mean, it was the immediate rebuild at that point. And I decided to go back. I sorted through and I felt that, as best I can tell with my Google foo ability, which is not much to say, but I think there probably is, there's definitely some radiation still coming out. I don't think it's coming in my direction. One thing I did know about watching plenty of typhoons roll through Japan over the years was they always rolled from the southwest to the northeast, kind of across from a western to eastern thing and then out to the ocean, which Fukushima was on the east coast, and therefore if you could make the assumption, which I can make it, whether it's correct or not, but the wind currents generally go from southwest to east, then Fukushima's on the east coast. That means any radiation is ideally blowing out to the east. I don't know. I kind of took in considerations like that, and I took the family back. And, even now, 9 years later, was that the right decision to make? I don't know. Am I going to get cancer in a few years? And if I do, will I ever know if that came from Fukushima? Who knows? So even now, I still don't have certainty from that decision, but I made the decision I had to make. I did it. Or I shouldn't say that. I made the decision I made, and I did it. And what I learned, I kind of knew it before that, but what I really sort of solidified in my brain at that point, which COVID is really showing to me now, which, talking to my mom yesterday, I found out it's kind of a Buddhist philosophy, and I didn't fully realize, is that all you can, or am I going to phrase this all you can or all I can? I'm going to talk about me. You can do whatever you do. All I can really do is make the best decision I can make with the information I have at any given time. And I can try and stack the deck and get as much information as possible with the most qualified information. But basically, when all's said and done, I just got to look at what I know and kind of what I feel based on what I know. I make an educated decision based on my gut instinct. And you know what? Sometimes that's going to be wrong. And, but that's all I can do. And in holding that opinion that that's all I can do, because I bet you there's people who would disagree with me and say there's more that can be done. So in the being of the opinion that all I can do is make the best decision I can with what I've got at any given time. I can always go back and look back in hindsight and look at, well, after I have more information, well, how could that decision have made better? And what clues could I have used to have made a better decision had I realized that at the time? But I don't regret decisions now that I make at the time if they're doing what I just really think was best. If I really at that point, not just best, but, well, by best I mean right. And best for my family and best for my finances or whatever. And sometimes that's an objective, practical thing where the best decision, unfortunately, means hurting someone or taking on risk that other people might think is unacceptable risk. Like, say, for right now in COVID season, going outside and talking to other people. I like to look back and reflect on, now that I have more information, how, in the future, if I were to come up with something similar, how could I make an even better decision than I made that time? But I personally have found emotional satisfaction in learning to be accepting of the decisions I made at the given time, even if they were wrong in retrospect, because in times of uncertainty, all I can do is all I can do. All I can do is the best I can do with what I got, and that's how I feel. And I guess that's basically my thoughts to you guys. I really hope everyone's doing okay out there. Well, no, that's a silly comment. Not everyone is doing okay. It's a rough world out there. I hope you guys can maybe find some solace in the words I've said. I guess that's what I want to say. To find some or some food for thought that can maybe help you sleep a little easier tonight, maybe with a difficult decision you got. So to epilogue this, because I talked a bunch about the decision I gotta make. My decision is that I'm leaving for July. I'm gonna go to Kelowna. And I'm opening up a lot of uncertainty. I am risking death. I am going out there in the world with the acceptance that, this decision might end up in my death. And that's a horrible decision to make, insofar as that I have a wife and a child that are dependent upon me, and parents that love me, and siblings that love me, and friends that will miss me. And to take that on as a risk is it's a heavy one. But I also look at what my circumstance is. I'm at this point where I'm in my mid 40s, and if I don't make this business plan work that I have right now, it's kind of my last effort. And if it doesn't work, then I gotta go, and my plan D, which is to become a company man for the rest of my life, really, and to just try and support a family to bare minimum. But this is kind of my last opportunity, my last odds, and I've stacked the deck towards all this for the past few years, and so what I need to do, as far as I believe, is to go out, take precautions, social distancing, masks, washing my hands, and then within the current environment, being as safe as I can, go out and try and meet the people I can, and be efficient and effective in the communications I do, so that I can minimize it, but hopefully find some people who are willing to join my dream and move forward in creating a new podcasting empire that helps bring humanity together. I mean, of course, I want to make money, and I want to, finance the future of my family with this. That's important to me. But what's also important to me too is that I actually believe in podcasts and how they enable communication, because you get real people who can say what they want, like me. No one has told me what to say here. No one has any influence. Or there's zero that all of this has come from my own head and from my own decision to say this. And I'm able to communicate to people out there, and other people can do that. And TV, radio, other media don't allow that. But the new age of the internet with YouTube and podcasting and stuff like that does enable that. But YouTube, you're still hosted on YouTube servers. You're up to, they control the video. They get to choose whether you're monetized or not. So you have to live by their rules. Whereas, to some degree with podcasts, you're hosting it and the other ones are just indexing it. And so they can take you off their index, but there's other indexes so you can get your voice out there. So, I think that's a great thing for enabling people to have raw communication. And I think it's going to make us better as a species. I really do. And I guess that's how I want to finish this. With that message of hope. Well, kind of launched off my own commercial success. But you know what? Even if my platform doesn't work, I'll figure out something to do. I'm a resourceful guy. I still think podcasting really is, it's probably gonna somehow change over time. It's not gonna be the medium forever, but right now in our current time, it is a medium that is bringing many of us together in ways that we're still seeing, that are still becoming aware of, and I want to be part of that. And that's why I'm doing this podcast, because even if my platform follows through, I'm hoping to friend the outsiders, my creative outlets. I might have to stop hosting it on my own platform and migrate it to someone else's someday if they build a better mousetrap. But I'm the friendly outsider, and I want to keep talking to you guys. And if you want to listen, I'll be back to say it. Take care, guys, and best of luck in these troubling times.